When I was a kid, I got in trouble all the time for stealing candy. The thing is, I never did any such thing. My parents said it started when I was about 5. I came walking downstairs for dinner one night with a lollipop in my mouth. When Dad asked where I got it from, I told him I found it on my pillow, but he didn't believe me. This sort of thing became a common occurrence, and as time passed, my punishments got harsher. By 7, I realized I'd get caught almost every time I sneak some. So I gave up, and I would just hand the candy over to my parents whenever I found pieces around my room. But that didn't last long either. Mom and Dad still weren't buying that I always just happened to stumble across candy. So now I was getting in trouble for stealing and lying. What was my solution? I started collecting the candy and selling to the kids at school and around the neighborhood. My parents used to wonder how their few bucks lasted me so long at the arcade. And I had a good 3-year run until one of my classmates dined me out. My parents scheduled a few counseling sessions for me, but nothing was found to be wrong. Then unbeknownst to me, they decided to put a hidden camera on my bookshelf. But Mom said whenever they would check the recordings, the screen would always be distorted and unviewable. And that didn't happen anywhere else but my room. Years later, after we had our oldest son, my wife stayed home for his first 4 years. After she went back to work, our mothers would alternate sitting for us whenever we needed. One day I dropped my son off at my mother's house about 6 a.m. I had to drive out to a work conference and my wife's car was in the shop. Mom fed our son breakfast and took him to school when it was time. She also picked him up later that afternoon. And when I finally got back to her house that evening, she pulled me to the side with a giant grin on her face. She showed me a picture she had asked my son to draw. All I saw was a gray glob with a pair of feet, hands, and eyes. I asked Mom what it was supposed to be. She said my son's teacher had to have a talk with him that day. She wondered where he was getting all the candy he'd been eating. My son told her Gorgie gave it to him. When Mom asked him who that was, my son replied, "The giant hamster that lives in Daddy's old room. He used to give Daddy candy too a long time ago."